United Kingdom, as an example, there are no social clubs anymore. They're all gone, and so the type of bars or venues, some bands are even having to pay the venue to play a show in the first place. And so very much the live scene in the UK, although you still get nice names coming over, like your artist Guy Davis or whatever, but the actual up and coming artists that are trying to get their name out there and get known, they find it very hard now to get any live work at all. And so it's almost that part of the industry is really tough now
I
for.
would not want to be a I would not want to be a 20-year-old Bob Dylan today, or
No.
even a Ewan McCall. I mean, it's the business landscape, the landscape of the music business, which some of it lies in the folk world, um, is totally different. It has been totally radicalized in terms of, you don't even have CD sales. The artist over the last decade or two, the artist at his gig was one of the biggest distributors of an album, of their album.
Yeah.
There's very little radio anymore, and what radio is tends to be sort of an online thing or whatnot. And then there is the record companies, the whole formula of a record company. When people like Jack Holtzman or Ahmet Ertegun or those guys in the 60s took an artist on, they would develop them. They knew that maybe their first album wasn't going to be a hit. When you signed someone, you stuck with them.
Yeah.
That formula changed in the 90s and into the aughts, and now forget it.
Well, you see, I think there's a positive and there's a negative, and
Yes.
and the positive is, I'm old enough that I still remember record shops with people going to buy vinyl records, and I'm old enough to I was there at the beginning of CDs, and I watched that go right all the way through. But and I hear a lot of artists say, "Oh, the music industry is dead now," or "It's finished now," or this and so on and so forth. But what I would say is that it's changed. That's the difference. And I go to Medium every year. Not the last couple of years because of COVID, but normally I go to Medium every year in Cannes, and I meet all the record companies from all over the world. And that's the only time you'll have Japanese and Australian and American and all the record companies there. And I'm going back to maybe 2003, 2004. And these are not young men. These are not young women. These people have been in the industry 40, 50 years. Some of them are older. And they couldn't work out what the industry was at that point in time because the record sales are not there. They tried to create the 360 deal for the artists and create this thing where they can take over the live performance a little bit and pay them a large advance. They really didn't know where it was going. But if you take, for example, 1985 to 1990 in the UK, if Guy or any artist wanted to be famous, there was only 4 television channels in the whole of the UK. So if you had taken an advert at that point in time on one of those 4 channels, which many artists did at that time, then you were kind of guaranteed you were going to get at least a quarter of the nation watching that.
Right.
And so therefore, now to have that same effect today, you would probably need $500 million because, there's just so many channels. But by having so many channels, the great thing about it is it creates a lot of sync opportunities, and it creates a lot of opportunities for writers to get into film, documentary, and so on and so forth. But I think there is a new bubble in industry, and I think it's quite a strong industry. But I think it's just the learning curve of the old industry to the new industry is very, very, it's a steep learning curve. And some have got it right, some have got it fantastically, but it's not about albums anymore. It's about continual content. Every day there is new content. Every day there is something new coming. Every day there's a story. Now it's important to see an artist make his scrambled eggs in the morning because that's what the public want. And you're trying to create, and in some ways it's exhausting as well, because you're thinking, when does the artist become the artist? Because sometimes it's more important now, the backstory of the artist is more important than the actual artist itself,
Well, the exciting part about it, you are right that it is a double-edged sword of where the music business has, I'll use the word, collapsed, versus where we are going with the new technologies and whatnot. And it's trial and error. You mentioned the 360 deal. You don't hear about that very often anymore. There is still, it's still exciting to be watching where the changes are going. And one of the things that I did in taking this epic road trip for a year was to be out, to be two things: to be out in America and take its temperature a little bit,
Yeah.
and B, to be in my own head and be able to figure out what's going to happen next, what's happening next for Thom Wolke, and then how does that change? How do those changes help people like Guy Davis and other artists? And so there is still a bit of an excitement thing. I took a title that I loved from a tour that Guy did many years ago, 20 years ago, called Gumbo, Grits, and Gravy. And what that was 3 artists out on the road. It was Guy Davis, Christina Balfa, and Laurie Lewis.
Yeah.
And what it was, it was kind of cool, but it was really just the 3 of them each doing their own show. Well, that didn't continue. And when the woman who created that retired, I said, I jokingly wrote to her, I said, I thought we were going to do another Gumbo, Grits, and Gravy tour. And she said, nope, I'm retired. You can have the name, go for it. And so I started putting my thinking hat on how to develop that even better. And so Gumbo, Grits, and Gravy is not necessarily driven by any one particular artist. It's a concept of integrating all these 3 different artists who may have successful solo careers, and meld them on stage. The old Gumbo, Grits, and Gravy, with that old lineup of Laurie and Christina and Guy Davis, they each just went on and did their own set, and that was it. This is Gumbo, Grits, and Gravy. We did a version of it in 2019, and we took Guy Davis and Ann Harris, an extraordinary fiddle player, and Marcella Simeon, who's this beautiful, soulful singer, and the daughter of Terrence Simeon, the Zydeco, wonderful Zydeco performer. And so we put them, and you meld them and have the 3 of them playing together on each other's kind of fronted music. And so now we're taking it to another level, which is to have, to show people that Gumbo, Grits, and Gravy is not centered on 3 musicians. It's the concept of Gumbo, Grits, and Gravy where it's a melting pot of lots of tastes of music on stage together, and even integrating a food element to it, so that when you have the gumbo grits and gravy appear, you might have some local restaurant be involved in the presentation that specializes in Southern American cooking. And so it is all literally, no pun intended, a melting pot of the music and the food and the lifestyle. And so now we have this new gumbo grits and gravy that will be available, with Guy is still involved in it. And Corey Ledette is a wonderful young Zydeco fella. He just got nominated for his second Grammy. And Walter Parks on guitar and bass. He was Richie Havens' guitar player, sideman for the last 10 years of Richie Havens' life, the famous American songwriter made famous at Woodstock. And Walter is an incredible musician. And so, it's this ever evolving thing. And those kinds of projects, creating and putting together those kinds of projects, are what excites me in today's topsy-turvy world of not only the music industry changing, but now we're coming out of, hopefully, this whole pandemic era where we feel like, I will frequently say, oh yeah, last year when we were over, oh no, wait a minute, it wasn't last year, it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago.
3 years ago. Oh no, it was 3 years ago. It's almost like we hit a pause button.
Yeah.
And now hopefully we're hitting the play button again.